Hello, hello, Dr. Marsh here, starting the conversation on tools for persuading. So by now we've had a conversation about how to build arguments and how to avoid fallacy in the arguments that we use to support our points. Now we're going to continue that conversation into specific tools and strategies, ways of organizing your content, and elements that should be present in your persuasive speech to help you achieve your goals. So, what is present in a persuasive speech that is absent in an informative speech? Most importantly, that's going to be a call to action. This time around, when you do the persuasive speech, you are going to tell your audience to do something. This something, whatever it is, must be immediate and actionable. Now, this is going to be dependent upon whatever your goal is for the speech, whether your goal is to get your audience to change their way of thinking about something or to go as far as to get them to do something. You're going to want to think about, okay, well, what can I get my audience to do, or how can I get them to commit to a new way of thinking before they walk out the door? Because once they walk out the door, the chances that they're actually going to do something or change something drop down significantly. So, for example, if you, maybe you're making a proposition of policy and you're submitting, hey, I think we need to have this new policy in place. And the first step toward that is to, signing this petition. We've got a petition going on. We need, 2,000 signatures or whatever that looks like. So your action, your call to action at the end of your speech could very well be, all right, guys, grab out your phone, download this app or visit this website and sign your name on this petition, or what have you. But you're going to want to be thinking in terms of immediate and actionable when you think about what that call to action will look like. So just kind of getting back, refreshing the conversation that we had when we explored informative speaking in how it differs from persuasive speaking, just remembering that an informative speech teaches, a persuasive speech convinces. This time you're trying to convince us of something, to think a new way, to go do something. An informative speech tells the audience what to think. This time around with your persuasive speech, you're going to tell us how to think. You're not just going to give us information on something. You're going to give us some information, build arguments so that we can shift or reinforce the way that we're thinking about or how we're thinking about a particular topic. And then finally, informative speech is non-controversial. Your persuasive speech can't really persuade people on content that they don't care about or don't have strong opinions on. So you're going to want to go for something that, and whether the topic itself is controversial or you approach it in a way where people could have opposing viewpoints, you've got to go at something with that angle. You can't go at something where everyone's going to be on board with what you're saying. Got to mix it up, all right? So, what is persuasive speaking according to your text? It's a deliberate attempt to create, reinforce, or change attitudes, beliefs, values, and or behaviors. So I want you to think in terms of, persuasion and coercion, and how do they differ? Because this is a very important line that we need to draw. At no point do we want to cross over into coercing anyone, because the concept of coercion implies some type of force, where you're making someone do something that is, against what they want to be doing. You're coercing them, you're making them do something that they don't want to do, making them say something they don't want to say, what have you. So I'm not going to dive into what coercion looks like and what the definition and all that kind of stuff is, because you can look that up. But the important thing for you to keep in mind is when you're persuading, you need to let the facts speak for themselves. Right? And you need to make sure that all of the content that you share is ethical. And at no point are you going to be forcing people into doing anything or thinking in a way that is different than the way that they would like to think. So just keep that in mind as you develop your content and choose your language. So we're going to take a look at what is persuasive speech should do, what a proposition is, and so that you can start to think about, well, what proposition am I going to be making in my persuasive speech? And then we're going to look at a couple of different kinds of appeals that you can use, traditional appeals and or modern appeals. So what should a persuasive speech do? First and foremost, your mission, should you choose to accept, is to narrow your listeners' options so that they make good choices. Again, thinking back to what I just said about coercion, manipulation, that's not the goal here. Your goal is to provide your audience with as much information as possible, as needed, so that they can make a good choice about whatever your topic is. For the second, you're going to appeal to a particular response, and I alluded to this a little bit ago. What do you want your audience to do? Do you want to convince them? Do you want to try to help them change their attitude, belief, value on a particular topic? Or do you want to reinforce an existing attitude? Or maybe you think they might be kind of middle of the road, and you want to kind of move them over more toward your side of thinking, so that's going to be to stimulate, get them to overcome any apathy that they might be thinking, which basically means they don't care one way or the other, okay? Or if you think they might be sort of on your side with things, then that's reinforcing their existing attitudes, beliefs, or values. That's all part of stimulating your audience. And then finally, actuating. This is what I was talking about when I said you want to get them to do something. So if you want to get your audience to vote, to commit to something, to physically take some kind of action, that's when you're trying to get them to actuate. So all of this is meant to support some kind of proposition. You're making some kind of statement. It must be a proposition of fact, of value, or of policy. And so a fact is something that you can prove to either be true or not true. A value statement is more along the lines of, is it ethical? Is it moral? Is it fair? Is it not fair? So if you're thinking in terms of, well, I don't really want to, maybe I want to talk about abortion and I don't really want to make a proposition of policy. I'm not ready to submit that there should, be a new policy or a new law in place, but I would like to speak about it in terms of value. So you could make a proposition of value where you're saying, I think it's wrong that we do or do not have this in place. So you have to decide what makes the most sense for what content you're looking to share. And then I just kind of covered policy right on in there with value. Are you trying to submit that we need to have laws or not have laws, or something that has to do with policy? Should we have a dress code? Should we not have a dress code? Should we have a policy that enforces, weapons or firearms in the classroom? Should we not have that policy, right? So you can always start to think of your topics in terms of both sides of the argument, both sides of the story, because that's going to help you develop a strong proposition and build strong arguments that are free of fallacy, and that can also bring up and refute, and address through rebuttal the opposing viewpoints. Okay, so you're going to be motivating your audience through your appeals, through what you do when you build your arguments, all right, for each of your main points. All right, so like I said, we've got 3 different kinds of proposition. The fact deals with, is it true or not true? Can you prove it to be true through fact or not? If it's not something that can be proven to be true or not true by doing a research study, think to yourself, well, can I do a research study to prove that is true? Then you're dealing with fact. If you can't, then you're into a proposition of value, where you're talking about whether we should or shouldn't do something, whether it's moral, immoral, ethical, unethical, that sort of thing. And then, of course, policy, that's pretty cut and dry. Should we or should we not do something? Should we or should we not have this policy in place, have this law in place, what have you? All right. So these are some propositions. We're going to do an exercise at the end of this conversation, and I'll include these inside of the activity itself, where you can look at these propositions and, based on what we talk about or what I'm sharing with you, since we're not having a two-way discussion, make a determination of what kind of policy this is and work on reframing it into the other 2 types of policies. And this is going to help, propositions. So this is going to help you understand that you do have options, and you just need to really think about what it is that you're trying to say and do with your speech, okay? All right, so as I said, we have a variety of different appeals that we can use. How are you going to appeal to your audience? We've got these traditional appeals, and then we've got more modern appeals. The traditional appeals should look familiar to you. You may have explored them maybe in a composition class or a rhetoric class if you've taken those. So you've got your pathos or pathos, We've got the potato thing going on here. So this is appealing to people's emotions, right? This is going to be important because you're going to have a lot of people in your audience always who they want to feel it in the heartstrings, right? You got to get them in the feels. And in order to do that, you need to use vivid descriptions, emotive language, stories, testimonials. Those are very powerful descriptors that can move people emotionally. Right, you definitely want to be thinking about, well, how can I tap into my audience's emotions, right? For those people that are very emotionally driven when they make decisions. Pathos, consider that. You've also got your mythos, the need to belong. To some extent, we all have a need to belong to something, right? So this is also an emotionally based appeal. You can appeal to people's sense of responsibility, right? Their sense of being part of a community, being a good part of their community, that sort of thing. So how can you do that? How can you, hey, you're not going to be a good member of this institution if you don't, donate to Pookie's Pantry in the front hallway. You're not really going to be a good Valencia student and a really good member of Valencia's family if you don't donate to Pookie's Pantry to help other students, your fellow students who are, in need. So that I kind of tapped into the mythos piece, your sense of wanting to belong and be a good member of whatever community that might look like. And we've got your ethos. That's your own credibility. That's something that you are working on from the minute you walk in, from the minute you walk up to begin delivering your speech until the minute you walk away. This isn't just something you do one time in your introduction as part of your credibility statement. This is something that you need to be considering throughout your speech, the content you include and how you deliver it. Okay, so ethos is really important because if you don't have credibility, if you don't establish and maintain it, then you've lost and you haven't achieved your goal or your purpose for the speech. And then, of course, finally, you've got the logos. This is your reasoning and logic. You've got people always who are like, forget the touchy-feely stuff. I'm not the kumbaya person. Give me the numbers. Give me the cold, hard data and facts. I'm going to make a logical decision about this. You've got to have this stuff in there, guys. If you think back to the support materials module, I told you the more different types of materials you have to support your message, the stronger it will be. All right, that hasn't changed. So including a variety of everything from testimonials where you can tap into that pathos, all the way on down to the numbers, the data, the cold hard facts that people are going to be looking for to help them make a more logical type decision. All right, and this is where you've got to make your statement, support it with your evidence, and then connect the dots for the audience. All right, so look back. If that didn't make sense to you, look back into building arguments and our discussion that we had there. All right, and then also the use of support materials so that you know how to structure that. So we also have more modern appeals that we can use to persuade. And there are four in specific. The first one is we would be appealing to need, and we'll take a look at that in more depth in a second. To harmony, the people's desire to feel harmonious and at peace mentally and emotionally. To gain, and then also finally to commitment. So the more we can understand about how humans think, how our brains work, the more we can use that to our advantage as speakers. The more we can tap into that to get people to tune in and also to engage with our content and perhaps open themselves up to being persuaded, however that looks like in your speech. So the first one, you'd be persuading, appealing to need. And this is based on Monroe's motivated sequence. Hopefully you remember we touched on that when we looked at audience analysis. Understanding where your audience is in terms of Maslow's hierarchy will help you craft the right kind of appeal. So if you know that your audience is way the heck down here, maybe they don't, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. They're not, they don't have a safe environment. They don't have ready access to food and water. They're having, as a result, maybe some issues and needs physically, health-wise that are tied to that. If they're way down here, then you cannot come at them with messages about what they might need socially or with regards to their self-esteem. They don't care about that. They're just trying to get through, you know, the next 24 hours or maybe even just the next few hours. So make sure that you hit your audience where they're at. So depending on who you're speaking to, I mean, in this class, obviously, you know, we're more up here. You know, you've got people who are focusing on bettering their lives through education, working toward this self-actualization. But you don't know. You could have some people in the mix that that slept in their car last night and they're hungry, right? So you've got to understand where people can be. If you want to address the need, you've got to be able to bring it up and offer a solution for it. And you got to hit them where they are. All right, so now we have an appeal to harmony. This is also known as the cognitive dissonance theory. As is human nature, I mentioned to you a minute ago, understanding how our brains work as humans is really critical. It will really help you craft your messages more effectively, not just in public speaking, but anytime you're communicating. If you want, you know, if you want mom and dad to buy you a car, if you want boss to give you a raise, if you're just looking to get the job, whatever it is that you're going for, understanding how people might be thinking, how people's minds work is a really powerful tool that you can use to your advantage. So the way that our brains work is we want everything to feel okay in our brain. We want to be at peace. Our brain is constantly seeking that sort of harmonious state where everything feels okay. So when we come in contact with something, whether it's an attitude, a belief, an idea, something that conflicts with our own, we feel dissonant. We become inharmonious. Our brain thinks, uh-oh, I'm encountering something that doesn't jive with what I already thought. So what do I do with that? And your brain will start to work to make sense of it and to find a way to bring it back into a harmonious state. So a powerful tool that you can use is to offer up an idea, a thought, something that you know is going to be in opposition to how your audience generally feels or believes or what their attitudes are. You got to stick it in there, but you've got to resolve it for them. Okay, you got to offer a solution. You can't just give an opposing idea and let it sit there, because then if we're not feeling harmonious, we can't concentrate on anything else, and you're not going to be able to move us along on the continuum, whatever it is you're trying to do, change our attitudes or beliefs about something. One thing that you'll want to be mindful of is this can be risky if the opinions of your audience, if you believe that they could be in very strong opposition, this can be a risky thing. If you bring this up, you've got to be ready to really offer a good solution that your audience is going to be willing to accept. So make sure that you're building strong arguments and that you can do that. So one thing that you can do also is use the strategy to make your audience feel inharmonious or dissonant about not taking some kind of action. So that kind of ties into the mythos piece, like, hey, you know, if you don't do this, if you don't donate, if you don't give your time to this pantry or to this endeavor, then you're a jerk. You're a bad person. And that's going to cause that feeling of dissonance or a lack of harmony within, and that is a motivator. So hopefully that makes sense. You've also got to gain. This is very, very prevalent in our society. We are all about me, 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 me. You know, what can I gain? What do I get out of this? You know this already because you understand that when you are beginning the speech, one of the first things that you need to do is help your audience understand how this information is going to benefit them, why they even need to be listening, right? So we tend to think about the decisions that we make in terms of what we might gain or lose from them. So if I do this, am I going to get anything out of it? Or if I don't do this, is something bad going to happen to me? Okay, so we evaluate this sort of cost benefit or value judgment whenever we're thinking about potentially shifting our attitudes, our values, our beliefs, or making a decision about some type of behavior or action that we want to take. We're deciding if it's worth it. You know, is this worthwhile? Is it worth the benefits or the you know, the drawbacks? I don't know. Is this a good or a bad idea? You know, will my people, whoever your people are, the people that matter most to you, will my people approve or disapprove? That's a big one. If your people are not going to approve of something, you're not very likely to do it. All right. But if they do disapprove, and I still really want to do it, what's going to happen? What are the consequences? And are they worth it? Okay, so we're going to be thinking through all of these things. Or we might be thinking, well, if I do this, will my people think better of me? Will I look like the good guy if I do this? Because that feels pretty good. So essentially kind of evaluating that, what do I have to gain or lose by doing or not doing whatever this thing is that you're asking of me. All right, we've got commitment here. This is the fancy word for this is elaboration likelihood model. This basically means, you know, how's your audience going to process this? Are they really going to tune in to you, or are they just going to kind of hang out on the sidelines mentally and maybe absorb a little bit and then, you know, dump it all out and walk out the door? Okay, so your goal is to get your audience to process centrally, where they're feeling motivated to listen and they're really thinking critically about the content you're sharing, right? And that starts at the beginning and runs throughout your speech. The first step that you're going to take to do this is help them understand in the beginning, why do they need to know this? Why do they need to listen to you? What are they going to get out of it? Or what are they potentially going to lose if they don't know this stuff? So you want to make sure that you're moving your audience toward that central processing, because if you kind of let them sit out on the sidelines with the peripheral processing, they're not really engaging with your content. They're not paying close attention. They might be kind of weaving in and out, hearing bits and pieces, and at the end, they may say, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, I'll donate. Sure, I'll sign whatever. Yeah, I agree with you. I'll raise my hand to that. But they're not fully committing to it. So they're just kind of, yeah, get off my back kind of reaction. And the minute they walk out that door, there's not a chance they're going to really take any actions at all. And you don't want that. So make sure that you're focusing on how to make the content interesting and relevant specifically to your audience, so that they are motivated to listen and really think critically about how that content is going to affect them. Okay, and you'll want to be thinking about, I have this example here, because a lot of times we tend to rationalize out when we're hearing information. You know, maybe you're talking to a group of young teens and they're getting ready to get their driver's license, and you're going to go talk to them about texting and driving. You know, those students or young teens might be thinking, yeah, I'll be careful, it's good, no big deal. Because you may not have done a good enough job to really motivate them to listen and think critically about the content. And the best way that you can do that is get it relevant to them specifically, give them vivid testimonials and examples, give them compelling statistics and things that are going to make them wake up and say, ooh, gosh, yeah, you know, I really need to listen to this. I really need to know this information. All right. So in addition to all of this, how you organize the flow of your speech is going to be important. Up until now, in the informative speaking, you may have organized your content. Let's say you did a narrative speech and you were telling a story, and chronological, you know, maybe it was a time sequenced kind of thing. First this happened, and then finally this happened. Or, you know, maybe you just kind of went for a topical strategy where you shared 3 specific points on a particular topic. Those kinds of things don't quite pack the punch that you're going to need in persuasion. You're going to want to go for more of the ones that I have on the slide here, the cause or effect. And that might sound a little bit familiar from our discussion about fallacy. You know, if you do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. That's kind of compelling. You've got the compare contrast, comparative strategy, where you can compare 2 things and then offer up which one is better. Make sure you're comparing them along the same lines. If you're going to do a comparison strategy, let's say you're going to compare 2 cities and you're going to talk about, you know, New York and Orlando, you got to tell us the same things about both cities. You can't talk about New York and, you know, their nightlife and their transit system and their food, and then come here and talk about, you know, theme parks, beaches, and, you know, whatever else, swamps. So those are disparate points. If you're going to compare and contrast, you're going to have to offer up the same information on both. You've got a problem solution strategy where you can identify a problem. Hey, our polar ice caps are melting, and that's wreaking havoc, and eventually we're going to spin out and die in an ice age. And so what can we do about that? Well, here's the solution. We can, you know, ride bikes instead of cars. I'm totally making that up on the fly, but there's a problem solution strategy. Those are very powerful depending on your topic. And then what I just talked about a little bit ago, you've got Monroe's motivated sequence based on Maslow's, where you're addressing a need and then you're solving it for your audience. So here are just some examples of how you can organize your content into persuasive strategy. This is Monroe's motivated sequence, right? This is where you're going to identify the need, and then you're going to offer a satisfaction. What is the solution? And then finally, you're going to help your audience visualize that. What does that look like for them? And then, of course, conclusion, that's where you're going to give them their call to action. Hey, go do this. Go think this way. Go vote this way. Go volunteer here, whatever that looks like. You've also got problem solution that I just talked about, where you can identify a couple of specific problems and then tie a solution in. You've got your comparative that I just described, where you might be comparing two different things. Maybe you're going to tell us, you know, which vacuum cleaner is better, and you're going to compare 2 vacuum cleaners or 3 vacuum cleaners, and you're going to provide the same kind of information on all of the vacuum cleaners, and then you're going to tell us which one is better. The facts must speak for you. It's not about your opinion or your bias. The facts must lead us in the direction. All right? So hopefully that helps you understand the elements, the pieces and parts that need to be in the speech, the considerations that you need to be keeping in mind while you're preparing the speech, while you're selecting your topic and deciding what kinds of arguments you want to build, and then of course how to organize all of this. What is this? What kind of flow are you going to have? Are you going to do a problem solution type thing? Are you going to do a causal type thing? What is most appropriate to the topic at hand and the message that you want to achieve, making sure that the call to action is present at the end of your speech in the conclusion area, instead of just saying, hey, so I hope this information was helpful to you. Should you be considering, you know, pet adoption? No, this time around you're going to go for direct and actionable call to action, where you're getting them to do something before they walk out the door. So be thinking about that as you consider your topic. Use that topic finder inside the Academic One database to help you with selecting main points that you might want to include, and be thinking about how you might want to organize those based on the organizational strategies that I just shared with you. And once you've digested all of this, go ahead and click next for the activity.